people a little bit about Rock Around Blockade. We campaign in support of socialist Cuba, in solidarity with the achievements of the revolution, in defense of it against US and imperialist aggression, in support of the 5 Cubans being held as political hostages within the United States, the Cuban 5. It's not just a campaign in solidarity with Cuba, it's also a campaign to educate people about the achievements of Cuban socialism and their implications for us here today. As the previous speakers have said, our celebrations today coincide with the Congress of the Communist Party of Cuba, the 6th Congress. Cubanologists, professionals, students of Cuban politics, and spokespersons for the mass media will be examining the proceedings in minute detail. Will it be, in their eyes, a rubber-stamping exercise illustrating the dictatorial nature of the Castro brothers, or a milestone in the inevitable progress towards market-centered socialism and thence to capitalism? Because of course, the Cubans are damned if they do and damned if they don't. Damned if actually the Congress doesn't say we are now going to proceed towards market socialism, because it will then call into question the whole of the past 50 years, and damned if they don't say that they're going towards market socialism, because this will prove once and for all that what exists there is a dictatorship operating in complete defiance of the will of the people. So we can expect a lot of that over the next few days, because there's one thing that the imperialist press is clear about: what happens in Cuba is very, very important to them. And therefore they have sent over huge teams. We know someone who's working for the BBC. Forget the fact all they have cuts in the BBC. They sent over a huge team there, right? They're going to cover it in the minutest detail because they're looking for that break, right, which they thought would take place 20 years ago following the collapse of socialism. For those who want perhaps a more balanced view, even today, about what the significance of this Congress is and how its place within a political life within Cuba, there is actually an article which some of you may have seen on the BBC website. It is written by someone called Anthony Capsia, who is in fact a friend of the Cubans. And I would recommend that you look for that, because it is a commentary on the significance of the Cuban Party Congress. And what he says, absolutely... Sorry. It's okay. And they never switch off when you want them to.
Music. Come on.
There we are. And yes, and he explains the significance of this present party Congress and how it will conclude a period of debate lasting 3 years, which our comrade described earlier. How it will resolve that and then launch a whole series of new debates for the forthcoming period as it attempts to address the very serious problems that the Cuban Revolution faces today, because it always faces serious problems, and thankfully for us, it always manages to surmount those problems. So in the coming period, as far as the mass media are concerned, we should not expect the facts to stand in the way of their shallow prejudices, and we may expect all sorts of clearly erroneous speculation in the period of the Congress. For our part, we will take what Raul Castro says as the most authoritative view, and even the BBC has therefore had to say that, in quotes, he insisted the socialist character of Cuba would be irreversible and accumulation of property would not be allowed. So in the midst of all these reforms, which in the eyes or perhaps the hopes or the illusions of some are going to introduce market socialism and thence proceed to capitalism, well, Raul has made it absolutely clear. The socialist character of the Cuban Revolution is not up for debate whatsoever. Whatever forms of privatization takes place, accumulation of property, the exploitation of others will not be allowed. So is setting quite clear limits on what is going to happen as they seek their way through the economic problems that they face at the present time. In other words, there is not going to be any change to Fidel's declaration 50 years ago. And in truth, despite its economic problems, the position of the Cuban Revolution, again, despite the continuing illegal US economic blockade, is in many ways stronger now than it has been in the past. Consider its international position. Its principal enemy, US imperialism, is now engaged and totally distracted by no less than 3 wars in the Middle East and North Africa, in Iraq, Afghanistan, and now it has been bounced into a 3rd war by the more aggressive French and British imperialism in terms of the onslaught on Libya. And as an aside, right, for those of you who don't read Fidel's reflections, right, 3 weeks before the no-fly zone was implemented over Libya, Fidel was already saying imperialism will have no choice in relation to Libya but to reassert its authority and seek to interfere in the processes that are taking place, even down to launching an invasion. 3 weeks before the imperialists themselves declared what they were going to do, Fidel was already saying that is what they will have to do in order to restore their position in North Africa and the Middle East. So that's a further reason, actually, why the imperialists so fear Cuba. It is not just the achievements of the revolution, but it's the clear-sightedness with which the leading role that Fidel continues to play, and other commentators and the Cuban Communist Party, in terms of standing against imperialism and attempting to undermine its plans for the oppressed peoples of the world. So the US is in a much weaker position. It is engaged in those 3 wars. It has been unable to resolve its financial and economic crisis. It faces challenges from other imperialist powers and from the rise of China as a major industrial power. Its position in Latin America has been significantly mined, in part through economic competition from Europe, in part through the rise of Brazil as a regional power, but most significantly of all, of course, through the development of the ALBA alliance, which has created a network which allows the Cuban Revolution to experience the support of particularly Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Nicaragua. So all those things point to a strengthening of Cuba's position in the international arena. However, what I want to focus on in the few minutes that I want to take is to discuss what Cuban socialism means for us today here in Britain, where we face a massive assault on working class conditions. Let us remind ourselves of what we face at the moment.